Ray, you have been one of my intellectual heroes in life, and I follow a lot of your thinking, and I'm very much interested in the fact that you don't believe in God. I have more hope that there is a God, but what I found fascinating was, with all your nuances of criticizing materialism as well as religion, you are an anti-agnostic thinker. You're militantly against agnosticism and for atheism, and that I don't understand.
I mean, my case against religion certainly doesn't come from history. I mean, people argue, how much evil religions inflict on the world. I very much believe that if you ran the history of the world twice, with and without religion, you couldn't be sure that the story with religion is worse than the story without religion. And we know that religion has brought, as well as much suffering, has brought huge benefits, not to speak of cultural benefits, art, and so on and so forth. So if I'm going to defend my atheism, it isn't defending it against, on the basis of an attack on religion as such, but against specific claims, and in particular the notion of God. It seems to me that whatever definition of God you arrive at, either is full of contradictions or has no content. Now,
how so?
So, for example, there are those who say, well, you can't describe God. This is the apophatic God, this is the hidden God, the God who doesn't, as it were, submit to being captured in adjectives and qualities.
You can only know what God is not.
Exactly. And it seems to me that doesn't leave much to get hold of, to put it mildly. But all the positive accounts of God seem to be, or at least certainly within the religions I'm most familiar with, particularly the Abrahamic religions, contain conflicting properties. God is both infinite and yet separated from his creation. God is both eternal, yet intervenes in time at particular moments. God is both infinitely wise and infinitely good and infinitely powerful, but also somehow sits back and pares his nails while human beings scratch each other's eyes out.
And each of these questions, you've mentioned 3 or 4, rather in terms of the coherence of God's characteristics, God in time, the problem of evil, have generated rooms like this full of books that are describing years of conversations among the smartest people in the world.
Yeah.
And it goes on and on. And it goes on and on. And
Yeah.
today the same thing. And so, what it means at a first level is that there is a human passion to find out about this and try and deal with it. You can't dismiss that.
It is a passion that seems to be well-founded in our sense of our own transcendence, that we're not just apes, that there's something about us that is totally different from the rest of the material world. And part of that is we have a consciousness that is a propositional awareness that is aware of this, of that, and the other in the ways that it appears that is not evident elsewhere in the material world. So we do have a sense of our difference from the material world, and indeed from the rest of the animal kingdom. And in part of that is the notion that we've been picked out by a superior deity. So that's the kind of driver. And also there is the desire for consolation. Consolation in the face of tragedy, consolation in the face of justice, consolation in the face of our finitude. All of those things make sense. After all, we're probably the only animals that are fully aware of our death.
Yes, and all of those are important drivers for our understanding, and whether we deal with the problems that religion has caused more suffering almost than anything else, and more tragedy, and our own transcendent needs, all of these things are drivers, but ultimately they don't determine the fundamental ontology. Either there is or there isn't things. But you still have this sense of mystery of the universe. You're not a materialist. I mean, if anybody can accuse you a lot of things, they're not going to accuse you of being a traditional materialist, a physicalist. You reject that. You fight against that. Therefore, you admit a mystery in existence.
Which is absolutely fine, but
that should, and yet you don't want to be called an agnostic.
Basically because it seems to be that anything that any God of the gaps, any God that would seem to address that sense of mystery has all those properties that seem to be in conflict.
So I could go further and say that whatever explains what you think is the mystery of existence, I might define that as God. Now, would you argue that therefore it denudes it of content?
I think we have to separate the mystery of existence from something explaining the mystery of existence.
Yes,
It seems to me,
okay.
I accept there's a mystery of existence. I don't have any words or subscribe to any of the words that are currently available for the explanation of that mystery.
Okay, and if we go along there, but there is something that if there is a mystery, there has to be an explanation, even if that explanation ultimately is that's the brute fact of reality, that there is a mystery, and I'm not sure I can handle that. I mean, if there is something, I always think there has to be a reason, sufficient reason, but you admit the mystery of existence.
I do, but then I don't feel that the way of, as it were, palliating that sense of mystery is to appeal to a square circle or some other contradiction.
Okay.
And I would see God as very much an idea that's aligned with the square circle.
So what would not be? What would be how would you characterize an explanation of the mystery of existence, if it were possible, that would not have the contradictions that you apprehend to God or something like God?
I think the mystery is like an horizon. And the idea that you can capture that mystery or solve that mystery in one word is like thinking you can capture the horizon in a little box.
That's a nice metaphor. I'm not sure that gives me a connection to a fundamental reality.
Yes, I'm skewered on fundamental reality in a sense. I don't require a connection. I mean, just the very fact of one's living skewers us on reality.
And so, how would you describe the mystery of existence from your perspective? Give me some adjectives that describe it.
Very much along the lines that I think you would describe it. First of all, there is something rather than nothing. Secondly, that there are living creatures as well as material objects. Thirdly, and most interesting, there's creatures like me, which are self-aware and actually are awake to the fact that there is a universe and are intrigued by it and try to understand it to some extent.
So those are three very powerful things. Why is there something rather than nothing? The existence of living creatures in general, and the existence of consciousness and self-awareness.
Yeah.
And so those three together are your mystery of existence.
I think there's a fourth one, or 3A, which is what Einstein identified, which he said is the eternal mystery, which is the comprehensibility of the world. The fact that this little bonce can have an idea about galaxies of billions and billions of miles size. And so there is a profound mystery of our ability to at least partially understand the world.
Right, so that integrates 3 and 1 in a sense and makes a 3A or a 4.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes,
and that's great, but you have no integrating idea about how to deal with all of those.
I think this is the job for humanism. Humanism hasn't started yet, and the central task of humanism is to get a clear idea of humanity, for good or bad, and so on.
Humanism has the reputation of being a pleasant form of atheism, and is a way to sort of get rid of all transcendence. So humanism is the general perception. You may be humanism with your own definition, but the definition in society is it's a nice way to talk about a pure physicalism and no meaning with a big M, and you have a lot of little small m meanings.
I mean, the two deficiencies of humanism are, A, it's smug, thinking that it's got rid of religion, that's the end of the story, whereas in fact it's the beginning of the story. And secondly, it thinks the alternative religion is a supernatural account of us, is a naturalistic account. That's very much what I've been opposing. But then there's the third task, which is basically to say, okay, we're not this, we're not that, so what other are we?
And?
So, story so far, let's look at what we are, hence unpacking everyday life and so on, making visible, as it were, that which we need to be puzzling over. But that's the story, I think, for the 22nd, 23rd, 24th century. I'd like to be transhumanist enough to be able to survive to see it and participate in the conversation.